as we've been talking about the differences between artists and designers, or artistic modes of thinking versus design modes of thinking, I want to take this time to really talk through and unpack what are the differences, what makes a designer unique. And as I said in a previous video, designers are actually working toward a goal, and that is to solve a problem. That is the ultimate end of all design thinking, is that you're trying to solve a problem. You're trying to solve a problem usually for people, and sometimes they know it or don't know it, but you're trying to solve a problem for people, and in trying to solve a problem, this key goal then sets everything else up to keep asking the question, yes, but does it solve the problem? This is a question that gets asked all the time, both by the designer and everyone working around them. Does this solve the problem? Does this solve the problem? Does this solve the problem? Get used to asking that question as a designer. Artists don't need to ask that question because they're not trying to solve a problem. So the artist should not be frustrated or confused because they're not trying to say, well, does this solve my problem? That's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to express themselves. Designers have to solve a problem, which means that designers have to act like the servant of the process. They actually have to think through, how do I serve this process best to help solve the problem, to help steward the problem, to understand it, to move it forward, to actually get to a solution that everybody agrees on and can work with and understand at the end of the day. That's the designer's role. They are the servant of the process, which means that from a communication perspective, designers ultimately are trying to create messages that have simplicity. They don't normally, unlike artists, have multiple meanings. They have one meaning or two meanings that's easily understood by the audience. It doesn't raise more questions. It leads to understanding. That's what design is about. In trying to help people solve the problem, you are trying to help them understand. This is what this is. This is how this works. This is how you use it. This is what you should do next. All of those are clear in good design because you've solved the problem. So what does a design thinking process look like based on my experience with a lot of different creatives who are designers? It seems to me that design thinking has 4 parts. The first part is the discovery part of a design process. The discovery part involves really trying to understand the problem itself, which means you may have to go and listen to people with the problem. You may need to go and sit with people who are having the problem. You may need to go and sit with people who have been working on solutions that haven't worked in the past. You may need to play anthropologist and go and sit and watch people and how they work. You may need to have looked at different ways that people historically have done that kind of thing. The discovery process involves a lot of research and thinking, because after discovery, you're going to have to define the problem. So what I typically say to creatives, and have worked with clients and actually have been a client myself, is the better the discovery process, the more that the people designing it understand the real problem, not sometimes just the stated problem, but the real problem that they're trying to solve. The better the discovery process, the better the solution will be. If you go fast in the discovery process and you blow over it and you don't listen, you typically wind up with very poor solutions because you didn't understand the problem you were trying to solve. Understand the problem before you start defining solutions, which, by the way, is the next part of the process, is to define, okay, here is the problem. This is what the problem is. We all agree on the problem, and here's the solution that we're proposing. What I often find is that creatives and people working in it are in such a hurry that they move too fast through the discovery process and then define the problem poorly. What does that mean? Well, it means that then they're going to define the solution poorly. So make sure as you're defining the problem that you actually have defined the problem and not your problem. There are moments that people define their problem. I don't like this, or I don't think this works. Right, this isn't about you. And I'm going to say that again and again throughout this video. This isn't about you. It's not about the designer. You're the servant of it, not the master. This isn't about you. It's about them. And the sooner you can get that into your head, it's about them. And what do they need? And what do they need to understand it? And what do they need to solve it? The better the solutions you'll design will be. It's not about you. Stop thinking it's about you. Start understanding it's about them and that you're making a gift for them. If you've come to define the problem, and come to begin defining the solutions. You can now start working through the development of those solutions. Development, however, in design is often iterative. What does that mean? It means we create something, then we actually stop and we review it with other people, sometimes the client, sometimes with other creatives, sometimes that's in critique, and sometimes that's in presentations. It depends on which stage you're in, but it's iterative because it happens in stages. We do that, we review, and then we create again. We create again, and we keep doing this kind of overlapping circles like a spring that moves forward until we get to the end. Design is very rarely a linear process in which I did this, you got this, now we're done. Can be, but good design usually recognizes that it has to keep learning and making sure that it's solving the problem and making sure that it understands the audience and making sure that it's clear over and over and over again until it gets to it. Now, that doesn't mean it has to go on forever. Design has deadlines, and those deadlines mean that you have to get to the last stage of this, which is delivery. You have to deliver. That's the thing about design that artists don't even really have to wrestle with. They may have a deadline, but very rarely, and most of the time self-imposed. You have to recognize that designers have deadlines. You have to deliver on those deadlines. And let me be clear about delivery. Delivery doesn't mean, well, I finished the file and I put it in the folder and I sent it to them. Delivery means you made sure it worked as it's being delivered. You say, well, but I built the file. Right, but it looks terrible on their website. So did you deliver a solution or did you just deliver a file? You are there to solve the problem, not to make files. Solve the problem. So, practical advice for designers. What would I suggest? In each stage of this process, I think there's different things you need to pay attention to. From my experience working with designers as a vice president of ministry resources for a global nonprofit, and from my experience as a professor, and even from my experience designing some stuff on my own. What would I say? Some practical advice for young designers. First thing is that discovery process is crucial. So ask a lot of questions and then listen. What am I saying? I'm saying shut your mouth. You want to talk because you think you know what you're talking about. The solution is out there, not in here yet. So ask a lot of questions and then be quiet and listen for what people are telling you. Listen clearly and carefully. Take notes. Ask more questions to make sure that you've gotten it clear. Really, really listen in the discovery process. The second part of it in the defining process is recognize that in design thinking, the definition of the problem and the definition of the solution typically tend to be collaborative efforts. Design is not a solo player game. You may see a designer off working on a logo or some ad campaign, but realistically, they need other people around them who can say, hey, what about this? Or are you sure that's the right solution? Or are you sure that's even the right problem? In thinking through how to define the problem, recognize that it's a collaborative effort and you need each other to be able to say, wait, I didn't see that. Or you know what? I think that's wrong. Or you know what? Here's something else that might help. Why? Because the goal is still to solve the problem. And all of the people that you can surround yourself with who are helping you solve the problem are your allies. And you as a designer need as many allies as you can find. Third, in the development process, it becomes easy to get frustrated with some of that collaboration. You created something, you said, okay, I'm getting feedback. Okay, I'll welcome feedback the first time and then maybe a little less the second time. And by the third time, maybe you're just like, I don't really care. I just want to finish this. I'm asking you the same question again. Did you solve the problem? Because remember, it's not about you. Solve the problem. Be patient. Because you, even though I'm sure you're incredibly talented, even though I'm sure that you may even have years of experience already doing this, you're solving a problem for someone else. It's not about you. It's about them and helping them and serving them and ultimately, in my mind, even loving them, caring for them enough to help them move in the development process toward a result that everybody can go, yes, that's the solution. Yes, that's beautiful. Yes, that gets us where we need. Yes, people will understand that. And finally, in delivery, I just want to give you a quick anecdote because I think this is crucial in thinking through what delivery actually means. So when I was young, I was 12, I got a paper route. which is, I know, makes me really old by now because most people don't even know that you get the paper delivered anymore. But I got a paper route, a big one, 100, 150 papers, sometimes several hundred on the weekend. And I would ride this paper out 3 or 4 miles on a bike. And I would throw papers and put them up on people's doorsteps. And sometimes I would miss. Surprise. Sometimes I put it in a bush. Sometimes, every once in a while, just because you're overzealous, you put it on a roof. Here's the thing. Just because I threw a paper at their house doesn't mean the paper was delivered. The paper wasn't delivered until the person had it in their hands and they could read it. What did that mean? It means that there were sometimes that somebody stole a paper, something came along and took it away, and they didn't have their paper. They didn't think, hey, the person who took it, they came to me and said, you need to solve my problem. Where's my newspaper? Sometimes I threw a paper up there and I put it in a bag and the bag tore and it rained and the paper was soaking wet and they still came back to me and said, you need to solve my problem. I need my paper. What is my point? In the delivery process, it is not complete until your client and the people you are working with and even the people who are going to see it, it's not complete until they have it and they can use it. To simply say I finished the file, I put it out on the cloud and sent you an email link for it, I'm done. No, you're not. You're not done until you make sure it works for them, because that's what solving the problem means. It means finishing it all the way through and not stopping, well, I finished my part of it, it's your problem now. I'm not saying you have to load it on their website or go above and beyond to some ludicrous means, go to the printer or whatever. I'm not saying that, although that sometimes is necessary. What I am saying is you need to get to the place where you know that your clients believe the problem is solved. I have my paper. I can read my paper. I have my logo. I have my file. My ad campaign's ready to launch, and we love it. Why? Because if you're going to keep being a designer, you need those people to keep coming back, and you need them to recommend you to other people. Design work is always in collaboration with others. So, if you're going to be a great designer, and the world needs great designers because it needs people who can solve problems simply and be clear with them, you recognize that you've got a set of skills and a set of tools. And what I'm going to talk about in the next video is how you share those with artists and how you can use both sides of the thinking to challenge one another to actually be better at each way of doing things.